This is Professor Bankard, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the reading reflections. There were several prompts you could choose from, empiricism versus rationalism. You could write on Plato's allegory of the cave. You could write about Descartes. So I'm just going to touch on a few of these, just give a few comments. Regarding empiricism and rationalism, the real core of the debate is over the third anchor point. So is all knowledge gained through sense experience, or is some knowledge a priori? A couple things to help clarify. The empiricist argues all knowledge comes from sense experience. We are blank slates at birth. The rationalist believes that a lot of knowledge is learned through sense experience, but some fundamental core things are known a priori. So I don't want you to argue that rationalism believes everything is a priori. That's not true. It's just that some things are. The empiricist thinks all things are learned through experience. The rationalist thinks some things, like math, logic, moral principles, other things, might be a priori. This is really important. Something that happens as a result of this debate over time, right? If all knowledge is learned through experience, and everyone's experience is somewhat different, then you can see how knowledge will become relative over time. So if all of my moral knowledge comes from experience, that I grew up in a Christian home, and my experience is in the U.S., for instance, but someone else grew up in Japan and was raised in a Buddhist home, my moral knowledge will come from my set of experiences, their moral knowledge will come from their moral experiences, and you'll get a sense of, well, of course we disagree about morality because our experience is so different, so you believe what you believe about morality and sort of all believe what I believe about morality, and it becomes sort of relative based on experience. But if rationalism is true, then we say every human has access to certain moral truths via reason. Then we can say, regardless of where you were born, you have to be held to certain moral standards because you have access to them. Christianity often cites Paul's words, right? Even the Gentiles have the law written on their hearts, or something. So it leads to big differences there. And what I'm going to ask you to write on is about whether you think morality is primarily learned or primarily a priori. Again, if you're looking for some evidence, some data, if you look at recent studies regarding infants, innate knowledge of infants, there's some recent studies in moral foundation theory. You can Google these things and find some information. Steven Pinker writes about the blank slate, so you might be able to find some help as you write. But I do think it's a really important debate that over time, right? John Locke was an empiricist. He was not a relativist. He thought experience gave us objective information about the world, but over time, it has sort of led to that direction. Regarding the allegory of the cave, powerful allegory. If you did not read it, Plato's allegory, right? I'm going to post a video to Canvas where you can watch a cartoon representation of the allegory. So you're going to have the allegory of the cave being read by a narrator, and you will see an animation of the allegory if you weren't able to picture it well. You basically have these people chained their whole lives, they're seeing shadows. In their mind, shadows are reality. This is what is ultimately real. This is all they've ever known. One prisoner escapes or is set free. It's never clear whether someone sets this person free or whether they set themselves free. They turn and they recognize there are people behind them carrying shapes. And these shapes are what generate the shadows. So you've got this new level of reality. The shadows, but then the thing that generated the shadows. And this person keeps walking. There's a fire. The fire helps project the shadows, but they see the fire, they're blinded because it's so bright given that their whole world has been in shadows. It takes a while to adjust. They keep moving forward. They eventually get outside of the cave. They're blinded by the sun. When their eyes finally adjust, they begin to see, oh, there are actual trees that the people in the cave actually sculpted into shapes of trees which then projected the shadow of the tree. So now you have three levels of reality: the shadow of a tree, the sculpture of a tree, the actual tree that the sculpture copies. There are actual animals, there were sculptures of animals, there were shadows of animals. So there's varying levels of reality. But the idea is outside of the cave is sort of, for Plato, the form. This is where real truth exists, right? And everything else is a derivative of the truth, less real. And an element of reality, an element of truth, but less real, less true. So then this person goes back down to share this with the other prisoners, and they mock him. And you can see how this might apply to a lot of areas of life. It's this general pursuit of knowledge and truth. So I asked to give an interpretation of it. A common one is early Christians like Augustine took Plato's allegory of the cave and turned it into a Christian allegory. Chained in darkness, chained in shadows, right? You get the imagery. People think they're seeing the truth, but they're not. It's the world, right? And what the world tells them is true. They turn to leave, like they start to question this reality, and they start to see, oh, there are deeper levels of truth and knowledge, right? They make their way outside this hard journey that takes a lot of effort and work to the light, from darkness out into the sun, S-O-N, right? A Christian might interpret it. And now we see real truth, ultimate reality and beauty. And we realized that what we were really chained to was lies or half-truth, deception. So then the goal after discovering the truth, salvation, enlightenment, is to go back down and try to get people out of the cave. But of course, how are Christians often met? That's crazy, forget you, whatever, just like the person coming back down to the cave. So Augustine, an early Christian father, actually sort of took Plato's cave and interpreted it in Christian context. You can interpret it in education, right? Maybe the shadows of the media. The media project shadows, whether it's Al Jazeera Network or Fox or CNN or MSNBC. We're only getting a shadow truth, a particular perspective of the truth. And it might require a kind of hard journey to get real facts and information from multiple sources to piece together a more holistic view of the truth, to go out of the cave, to see the light, and then to come back down and try to share it. It could be someone leaving home, going to college. The parents have a particular worldview that they give the child, and that's all the child knows, and then they go and they hear other worldviews, new information, new evidence, different cultures, backgrounds, religions, whatever it might be. And so, as a parent, I project a kind of cave world for my children. They're only going to hear my voice early on. And over time, they're going to have to sort of go on this hard journey towards the truth on their own. I don't want to project falsehood on them, but it certainly is my view of the world. So the allegory of the cave could be interpreted in lots of ways, which is why it's still relevant and I think still beautiful. The last thing is Descartes. I just want to say a few things about Descartes. One is, Descartes' conclusions are very orthodox. He comes to the conclusion that God exists. He comes to this conclusion in several ways. One is he's certain that he exists, but he knows he didn't bring himself into existence. So how did that happen? He also argues that he has the concept of perfection inside of him. Every human does. That's how we know something is imperfect, right? Is by the standard of perfection that seems to be inside of us. Similarly, every human seems to have the concept of infinity, even though everything we experience in the world is finite. So where did the concept of perfection and infinity come from, given that our experiences tell us about imperfection and finite? He says, well, it couldn't have come from a finite, imperfect being. The concepts themselves must have come from an infinite, perfect being. So he argues for God. He argues for the existence of a soul. These are very orthodox things, but Descartes gets in trouble because of how he does it. As in the medieval period, you appeal to authority. It was enough to say the Bible said it, I believe it. The priest says it, the Pope says it, I believe it. But as the modern period emerges, the rise of reason, the rise of science, it was no longer enough just to point to authority. If you were going to believe in God, you need to have good reason, good evidence for believing. It had to be a rational thing, not proven, but a rational argument had to be made. You couldn't just believe in the soul. There needed to be some reasons behind it. And Descartes was convinced if Christianity was to survive in this context, if it was to spread in this context, there had to be good arguments and good reasons. Being Christian had to be a reasonable proposition. So he implements reason to make these arguments. And the church is very upset. Don't use human reason, just appeal to authority. The problem is if we just appeal to faith, if we just appeal to authority, we can believe almost anything. I have faith that there is a flying spaghetti monster orbiting the earth that answers all of my prayers. If I can just rely on faith, then I can believe that. I can believe that God told me to blow up buildings, take people hostage in France, drown my children like Andrea Yates. At some point, if we only rely on faith, we can believe anything. There's no parameters. Reason is here to say what beliefs seem at least to be somewhat reasonable and which have no support at all. And Descartes took on that challenge and again was sort of condemned by the church as a result, even though his conclusions were very orthodox. Something else about Descartes that's important, right? He doubts, but the point is to get to certainty. He doubts in order to find something he cannot doubt. So there's a deconstruction, but also a reconstruction that I think is important. So I hope this helps. If you have any questions at all, let me know, and I will see you guys online.